before the wires came in, before the meters started running, a homesteader in western Kansas in the winter of 1913 could put a full breakfast on the table in 20 minutes, in the dark, without flipping a single switch. Butter from the springhouse trough where water held steady at 50 degrees year-round. Bacon from the smokehouse hung the previous fall. Potatoes from the cellar layered in straw since October. The stove was not even lit yet. That same breakfast today requires a refrigerator, a grocery store, a debit card, an electric range, a permit to butcher anything for sale, and, in some states, a license to collect the rainwater off your own roof. The Homestead generation did it with their own 2 hands. The modern American cannot do it without permission from at least 4 institutions. Number 21 was the lamp that won a world prize in 1915. Number 9 is capped at 110 gallons in Colorado. Number 5 is banned for retail sale in most American states. Hit that subscribe button because this list might change how you think about the grid you depend on. Let us count down the 25 pre-electric home tricks the modern system spent a century convincing your great-grandparents you did not need. Number 25. Buying day-old bread. The bakery wagons that came through small American towns in the 1910s sold yesterday's loaves for a third less. A loaf cost 9 cents fresh, 4 or 5 cents a day later. The Homestead generation understood that day-old bread was not inferior bread. It was the same bread 1 day older. Most kitchens kept a sourdough sponge bubbling in a crock by the stove. A stale loaf was sliced thin, dampened with milk, and laid over a covered skillet. The crust softened, the crumb took the moisture. The bread came out soft and smelling fresh. The penny saved went into the coffee can on top of the stove. Today, the supermarket throws away an estimated 30% of its bread, and the bakery charges $6 for a sourdough loaf the Homestead generation made for the cost of flour and time. If the day-old loaf saved pennies, the next habit saved the whole summer's milk. Number 24. The Spring Branch Icebox. Long before the Iceman came up the lane, the Homestead kept its butter and cream in the creek. A wooden crate, weighted with rocks at the bottom of a shaded spring branch, held a dozen jars at the temperature of the running water, which stayed within a few degrees of 50 all year long. Flowing water moves heat away faster than still water. A jar in the spring branch stayed at the temperature of the spring itself. In Kansas, that is 54 degrees, cold enough to keep butter from going rancid for a week. The cord went taut when you reached for it. The jar came up beaded with cold water. The butter inside was hard. Today, a refrigerator runs continuously and adds roughly $200 a year to the electric bill, doing the same job the creek did for nothing. That was the small refrigerator. The next one was the whole pantry. Number 23. The sand floor pantry. Many farmhouses of the 1910s had a small north side pantry with a floor of damp sand. The principle was evaporation. Wet sand pulled heat out of the air above it, and a pantry with a sand floor ran 10 to 15 degrees cooler than the rest of the house in summer. Crocks of pickles, baskets of carrots, and bowls of butter sat on shelves above the sand. The room smelled faintly of clean earth and vinegar. It was the same trick that keeps a wet bandana cool on the back of your neck in August. Today, a basement pantry of the same size costs $12,000 to finish, requires a dehumidifier, and accomplishes less than a tray of damp sand did for free. If the pantry kept the food cold, the next item kept the whole house running. Number 22. Wood ash lye for everything. Hardwood ashes from the cook stove went into a barrel with a small hole near the bottom. Rainwater poured over the top and leached out as lye. Boiled down with rendered lard, it became soap. Diluted, it cleaned floors. The ashes also went on the garden as potash. The chemistry is potassium hydroxide, leaching from the ash. The Babylonians knew this nearly 5,000 years ago. Your great-grandmother knew it too, and she made soap from it in a kettle over an outdoor fire 2 or 3 times a year. Today, a single bottle of dish soap costs $5, and Procter & Gamble was already among the largest advertisers in America by the 1920s, spending decades convincing your grandmother the Homestead system was dirty. If the ash made the soap, the next item made the light to see it by. Number 21. The kerosene mantle lamp. The Aladdin mantle lamp, manufactured by the Mantle Lamp Company of America in Chicago starting in 1908, was the rural answer to the early electric bulb. It used a cotton mantle heated by kerosene vapor that glowed white hot, producing 60 candle power of clean light. The Aladdin Model 6 won a gold medal at the Panama Pacific International Exposition in 1915, where it was judged the best kerosene lamp in the world. 1 cup of kerosene burned for an evening. The light was steady and warm. You could read by it. You could sew by it. Today, a power outage strands the average American in the dark within 90 seconds because almost no one keeps a working kerosene lamp anymore. Pause for a moment. Day-old bread fed the sourdough sponge. The spring branch needed no fuel. The wood ash lye came out of the cook stove that was already burning. Every one of these was part of a closed loop, where the waste of one task became the resource for the next. This is what your great-grandparents knew. The homestead was a system. The modern grid did not just replace one of those loops. It cut every single one and sold you a separate subscription for each piece. Number 20. The springhouse butter trough. Where the spring branch icebox was a creek with a crate, the springhouse was the architectural version. A one-room building of stone or brick, built directly over a spring with a stone-lined channel running through the floor. Cold water flowed through year-round, holding the interior at about 55 degrees in July and just above freezing in January. Crocks of butter sat in the trough. Hams hung from hooks in the rafters. The structures stayed in active use into the 1930s, when rural electrification finally finished the job. If the springhouse kept the butter, the next trick kept the eggs. Number 19. Crocking eggs in water glass. Fresh eggs could be preserved for 9 months to a year in a crock of sodium silicate solution, known to every farm wife as water glass. The eggs went in pointy end down. The solution sealed the pores of the shell. The Depression generation stocked their cellars with 2 or 3 crocks every September, enough to carry a family through January and February when hens stopped laying. You tested an egg by setting it in cold water. If it sank, it was good. If it floated, you threw it to the dog. Today, the federal egg in your grocery store is washed in chlorine, which strips the natural seal off the shell. The Homestead generation kept theirs without electricity for nearly a year. If water glass held the eggs, the next item held the rest of the harvest. Number 18. The straw and sawdust root cellar. A root cellar dug into a hillside, kept at 34 degrees, held potatoes, carrots, beets, cabbages and apples from October to April. The vegetables were layered with sand or straw. The sand held moisture, so the carrots did not shrivel. The straw kept the apples from touching, because one bad apple really does spoil the barrel. The cellar smelled like fresh dirt and old apples. The potatoes came out crisp and firm in March. Today, the average American throws away 30% of the produce they buy. The root cellar that lost 2% over 6 months has been replaced by a crisper drawer that loses 10 times as much in 2 weeks. If the cellar kept the harvest, the next item brought in the cold. Number 17. Buying ice by the card in the window. By the start of the 20th century, most American towns had ice delivery routes. Families placed a printed card in the front window showing 25, 50, 75 or 100 pounds. The iceman cut the right size block and hauled it into the kitchen. Frederick Tudor, the Boston entrepreneur who built the trade starting in 1806, had grown it into something enormous by 1890 when 10 million tons of ice were sold domestically. The American Ice Company dominated the Northeast supply. The system was real, working national infrastructure run on horses, sawdust, and frozen ponds. The kids chased the wagon for shavings in August. If the ice came up the lane, the next item came out of the barn. Number 16. Rendering lard at hog killing time. After the first hard frost, neighbours gathered for the hog killing. The lard from one hog filled 6 or 8 crocks and became the cooking fat for the next year. It greased the pie crust and fried the eggs and seasoned the cast iron. The cracklings went into cornbread. Nothing was wasted. The old saying was that the homestead used everything but the oink. The smell of rendering lard hung in the yard for 2 days. Today, a 1-pound tub of lard costs $5, hydrogenated and shipped from a slaughterhouse 2,000 miles away. Here is what most people miss. Every item so far is locked to a calendar the modern grocery store has spent a century erasing. The eggs got crocked in September. The hog got killed after the first hard frost. The homestead generation lived inside the seasons. The modern grocery store sells you a strawberry in January for 15 times what it costs in June. Your great-grandparents would have known immediately that someone, somewhere, was being charged a price they could not see. Number 15. The smokehouse with hickory smoke. Once the hams were salt cured, they hung in the smokehouse for 2 weeks of cold smoke. The fire burned in an iron kettle on the dirt floor, a smouldering pile of hickory chips covered in ash, so the smoke came out cool, never hotter than 120 degrees. Any hotter and the fat would melt out of the meat. You tended it day and night for 2 weeks. The result was a ham that hung in the rafters all summer and got cut into 9 or 10 months after the kill. Today, a grocery store ham sells for $6 a pound, injected with water and phosphates, and would have been laughed out of a Pennsylvania farm kitchen in 1912. If the smoke cured the meat, the next item set the salt. Number 14. Salt curing pork in a brine that floats an egg. Before the meat ever went to the smokehouse, it had to be cured. The brine was salt and water, sometimes with saltpeter and brown sugar. The test for the right strength was older than the thermometer. You floated an egg in the brine. If the egg rode high, the brine was strong enough. If it sank, you added more salt. The egg float test shows up in cookbooks back to the 17th century. The meat went under a stone weight in the barrel for 6 weeks. Today, the skill every farm wife in 1910 knew is now practiced by less than 1 in every 1,000 American households. If the brine cured the meat, the next item cooked the supper without ever lighting the stove. Number 13. The haybox cooker. In 1909, a woman named Margaret Joyce Mitchell, the former dietitian of Manhattan State Hospital, published a book called The Fireless Cookbook through Doubleday, Page & Company. It contained 250 recipes for cooking food on retained heat alone inside an insulated wooden box packed with hay, wool or sawdust. You brought a stew to a boil for 10 minutes. You sealed the pot in the hay box. 6 to 8 hours later, the stew was done. The savings in fuel ran between 20 and 80%. Today, a slow cooker plugs into the wall and uses electricity continuously. The haybox did the same job with one 10-minute burst of fuel. If the haybox cooked the supper, The next item dried the harvest. Number 12. Drying fruit on a thread by the hearth. Apples sliced thin, beans shelled, corn off the cob, all strung on heavy thread and hung near the fireplace. The moisture left over a week or two. Stored in cloth bags, they kept for years. Rehydrated overnight, they cooked up the next day like fresh. Dried fruit was the Homestead's January medicine, the source of vitamin C through the dead of winter. The strings hung from the kitchen rafters in October like garlands. Today, the dehydrator at the hardware store uses electricity for 12 hours per batch. The string by the hearth used the heat the fire was already throwing. If the dried fruit fed the winter, the next item fed every loaf of bread. Number 11. The sourdough starter passed down. Before the Fleischmann brothers founded their company in Cincinnati in 1868 and began manufacturing the first commercial baker's yeast in America, every loaf of bread rose on wild yeast. The starter was kept in a crock on the warm side of the stove and fed every day with a spoonful of flour. The miners of the California gold rush kept theirs warm against their skin on cold mountain nights. That is where the nickname sourdough for an old prospector came from. A Homestead starter cost nothing, and the bread fermented for 8 to 12 hours, breaking down the gluten in a way the modern commercial loaf never does. Today, a packet of Fleischmann's yeast gives you a loaf in 2 hours. The starter your great-grandmother kept in a crock gave her a better loaf in 12. Here is the deeper angle. Every item so far is something the Homestead generation did without paying a single corporation for a single product. The whole system was outside the cash economy. Then the corporations arrived: Procter & Gamble, Fleischmann's, the American Ice Company, and the Sears Roebuck catalogue of 1908 mailed 3.6 million copies that year, up from 318,000 a decade earlier. Number 10. Hand-pumped well water. The pitcher pump on the kitchen counter, fed by a pipe to a shallow well, was the household water system on most American farms in the 19-teens. A few strokes of the handle brought up a gallon. No electricity required, no water utility, no monthly bill. The mechanism is the same one in a bicycle pump. A child of 7 could work it. A grandmother of 80 could work it. Today, the average American household pays roughly $70 a month for water the Homestead generation drew from 20 feet under their own kitchen floor for free. If the well brought water from below, the next item caught it from above. Number 9. Cisterns of rainwater off the roof. A roof of about 1,000 square feet catches roughly 600 gallons of water from a single inch of rain. The Homestead generation plumbed those gallons through gutters into a cistern and used the soft rainwater for laundry and bathing. This is the item most literally banned today. The state of Colorado, under water rights law tracing back over a century, capped residential rainwater collection at 110 gallons under House Bill 1610-05 in 2016. Before that bill, large-scale collection was effectively prohibited. Utah caps collection at 2,500 gallons and requires registration. The water that fell on your roof, in the law of Colorado, was considered to belong to a downstream water rights holder. A homeowner in Denver is allowed to collect just under 2 barrels of the rain that falls on their own roof. Your great-grandparents would have considered that the strangest law they had ever heard. If the rainwater was for washing, the next item was for healing. Number 8. The onion poultice for a cough. A yellow onion, sliced and gently cooked, wrapped in cotton and pressed against the chest for 30 minutes, was the standard rural treatment for a deep chest cough in the 19-teens. The folklorist Kathleen Stocker documented the case of a 7-year-old girl with severe pneumonia treated with an onion poultice around 1904 who recovered. Onions contain quercetin and sulfur compounds with anti-inflammatory action. The poultice came off the chest warm. By morning, the cough had loosened. Today, the cough syrup aisle of the drugstore runs 40 feet long and costs the average household $60 a season. The onion poultice cost the price of one onion. If the onion was the poultice, the next item was the syrup. Number 7. Honey and onion cough syrup. A sliced onion in a jar covered with honey, sealed and left on the counter overnight. The honey drew the moisture out. By morning, the jar held a thin amber syrup given by the teaspoon for a cough. Onions contain compounds active against Staphylococcus, Streptococcus, Klebsiella, Pseudomonas and Candida, according to a study published in 2003 in the West Indian Medical Journal. It was so common in 1910 that no farm wife would have written it down. It was just what you did when someone in the house had a cough. Today, the equivalent commercial syrup costs $12 a bottle. The honey and onion cost less than $2 and worked on the same throat for the same reason. If the syrup healed the body, the next item kept the household running. Number 6. Mending and darning instead of replacing. Socks darned with a wooden mushroom and a needle. Sheets turned sides to middle when the centre wore thin. Collars unstitched, flipped and re-sewn. The Depression generation considered a hole in a garment a problem to be solved with 20 minutes of work, not a reason to buy something new. The Sears Roebuck catalogue of 1908 was already pushing the other direction. The catalogue wanted you to buy. The Homestead wanted you to mend. Today, the average American buys 68 new garments a year and throws away 81 pounds of clothing. Here is the deepest version of the villain. Your great-grandmother was offered a trade, time and labour in exchange for convenience and cash dependency. What she lost was the closed loop itself. The grocery store stops in a snowstorm. The grid stops in a hurricane. The springhouse does not stop. Number 5. Raw milk straight from the cow. In 1910, before any state had passed a pasteurization law, the milk on the rural breakfast table came from the cow in the barn that morning. The whole rural economy of the American Midwest ran on raw milk. Then, in 1924, the United States Public Health Service developed the Standard Milk Ordinance. Michigan became the first state to fully mandate it in 1947. Today, the retail sale of raw milk is banned in roughly half of American states, and the interstate sale of raw milk for human consumption is banned outright at the federal level under Food and Drug Administration regulation. The literal milk your great-grandfather drank as a boy is now illegal across most of the country. Number 4. Home butchering for the family table. In 1910, every farm killed its own. A farm boy of 12 could break down a hog into hams, shoulders, bacon, sausage, lard and cracklings before his father had finished sharpening the next knife. Today, butchering for personal use remains legal in every state. But butchering for sale requires inspection by the Department of Agriculture in most cases, and the requirements are stringent enough that small farms have almost entirely exited the business. The rural skill every household once practiced is now done by an estimated 1% of American families. The rest depend on a meatpacking industry that, during the 2020 pandemic, briefly stopped working. Number 3, the cash envelope budget. Every payday, the wages came home in cash. The household sorted it into envelopes, rent in one, coal in another, flour, sugar, coffee, lamp oil, doctor fund, savings. When the envelope was empty, the spending stopped. The leftover went into the coffee can on top of the stove. Banks closed, credit gone. Cash was king. More than 9,000 American banks failed in the first 3 years of the Depression, and the families that came through with the least damage were the ones that had not been depending on the bank in the first place. The envelopes told the truth about where the money went. Today, the average American household carries over $6,000 in credit card debt at an interest rate above 20%. Number 2. The seed bank in the attic. Every farm saved seed from the best plants of last year's crop. The biggest tomato, the most productive bean vine. Stored in cloth bags in the attic, the next spring's garden grew from last summer's harvest. The genetic line of every plant traced back to every plant the family had ever grown on that land. By 1910, the W. Atlee Burpee Company in Philadelphia was already the largest seed seller in America, but most homesteads still saved their own. A tomato in southern Indiana looked and tasted different from one in central Iowa because the seeds had been adapted to that exact soil for 40 generations. Today, the vast majority of American garden seed is sold by a small number of corporations, much of it patented hybrid seed that does not produce viable seed. The closed loop of the seed has been cut. And now, Number one, the closed loop homestead itself. Here is the thesis. Every one of the previous 24 items was a thread in one fabric. The day-old bread fed the sourdough sponge. The wood ash became the lye. The lye made the soap that washed the milk pails that filled the crocks that sat in the springhouse trough, that was fed by the spring that watered the garden, that grew the onions that went into the cough syrup that healed the child. This is not a list of 25 tricks. It is one system. Every loop closed inside the household. Every dependency that mattered was satisfied by a person you could see across the kitchen table. A janitor in Akron in 1933, when his bank collapsed, did not starve because his wife had 3 crocks of water-glassed eggs in the cellar, a ham in the smokehouse, and a sourdough crock by the stove. A widow in a holler in West Virginia in 1934, with no cash income, fed 5 children through a winter on a root cellar packed in October and a hog killed in November. The Depression generation survived the worst economic event in American history because the system did not reach them. They were outside it. The modern grid has been engineered to make every closed loop impossible. You cannot keep your own milk. You cannot collect your own rainwater past 110 gallons in Colorado. You cannot sell the meat from the hog you raised without inspection. Every link has been replaced by a subscription, and when the subscription stops, you have nothing. When the power fails, what your great-grandparents had was not 24 tricks. It was one system, and the system was their own 2 hands. So here is what I want you to do. Pick one of these and try it this week. The cash envelope budget from item 3, the hay box cooker from item 13, the honey and onion cough syrup from item 7. I tried the hay box myself for 2 weeks with a pot of dried beans every Sunday. I cut my stove time by about 3 hours a week. The beans came out better than any slow cooker I have owned, and I have not bought a can of beans since. Now drop in the comments and tell me which one you are going to try. I want to know if the cash envelope scares more people than the rainwater cistern, because the envelope is the one that fixes your money and the cistern is the one that is actually illegal in 2 states. Tell me below. And when you do, remember the line your great-grandparents understood and we forgot. The grid does not own what you do not need from it. That is the Homestead generation. That is what they knew.